just a week ago, who was Bob Harris's favorite draft of all 32 teams? That and more this week on the couch. Excitement. Let's revisit the excitement, Bob. Who are you most excited about team-wise from the draft?
First of all, I was excited for me because Nashville was quite the extravaganza. Great job, Nashville. Kudos to you. I saw this a couple years ago going back to Philadelphia, where they had the long, open area lined by tents with radio shows and various things. And then Nashville said, hey, Philadelphia, we're doing it with bars.
Yeah.
Right. Great idea. And it was a great atmosphere. I had a good time. But looking at the draft, so something I hated going into the draft, or something I hated when it first came up, was the Arizona narrative. I mean, are you really going to hire a coach and bail on a first-round pick and draft a kid first overall because this coach, who a losing coach in college, said back in October when he was about to play said quarterback, he's the best thing since sliced bread.
Not just since October, though, because if you read the piece Josh Weintraub did, it's 6 years in the making.
Right.
I mean, they've had eyes for each other for a long time.
Right. But still, I'm thinking, is this is this how the Patriots would do things? I mean,
no.
And by the way, Steve Keim, how do you still have a job? You have two things
Agreed.
You need to do. Hire a coach and draft a quarterback. You failed miserably at 2, so you get another shot. I get that. But I've evolved on all this, Sig.
Ooh.
I'm good with it. I'm happy with it. Not only am I happy with it, look, I like what a lot of teams did. I like what some of the moves, just a few teams come to mind. Atlanta, shoring up that offensive line. It was a big issue. They have all the other pieces in place. It seems like any number of teams did moves like that. But Arizona just said, hell, I realize this doesn't always work, but desperate times do call for desperate measures, right? And so if you're going to go all in on all this, so I've evolved on the whole Kingsbury loves Kyler Murray narrative, and I love it now too. It worked for Cleveland last year. It did not work for Cleveland, 20 years prior to that, when they did it every year, right? So I'm not sure it's going to work, but kudos to them for giving it a shot. Steve Keim will be working at my house somewhere if it doesn't work. I hope to give him a job doing something. But no, I think it's an exciting thing. And if the NFL, we see, if every coach who's, spent 5 minutes with Sean McVay is going to be a head coach, right, why won't every team out there be looking for that next athletic, dynamic young quarterback, pair him up with a dynamic young coach, and add some weapons in the draft to get him rolling? And I think that's the thing. It wasn't that they just bought in with Kyler Murray. They bought all in. I mean, Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keyshawn Johnson. They went all in. Hell, they got Caleb Wilson, Mr. Irrelevant, a guy that may, they've got a couple of those guys. But I just think that if you're going all in like this, they did it, and I'm excited about it. I don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be, but aren't you feeling like, hell, I want some shares of Kyler Murray? There was a great line on Good Morning Football this morning, Sig. So credit to Kyle Brandt and Nate Burleson for kind of running through this. But Kyler Murray is Bitcoin. I don't know what he is, but I want some.
Well, it's cryptocurrency. First, I want to say that speaking of putting on parties and bars, where I'm living now, New Orleans, knows a thing or two about that. And they mentioned it because the Nashville scene looked so great. They said, what about New Orleans? I think they said, there's just no room on the calendar here. The party never stops already. It's Jazz Fest right now, folks. Come down for Jazz Fest. I'll give you my guide to Jazz Fest.
And it would ruin. It would ruin things.
It would. It just wouldn't work here. But they know how to do Super Bowls here. I guess they could do it in the Superdome.
I guess, but it wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be the same.
It wouldn't be. But kudos to Nashville and kudos to that good time. And again, you come down here for Jazz Fest. I'll give you my Bloom guide to Jazz Fest. Go ahead.
And by the way, looking forward, I mean, once it gets to Vegas, it's never leaving, right? I mean.
Right. Well, it's like Vegas is the singularity, right, Bob? Everything is going to converge. It wasn't that how it was in the stand, right? Yep. Everything was going to converge in Vegas. Yep. So it always comes back to the stand. But to go back to Arizona, also in the desert, I think that you hit on the most important part when you said all in.
Right.
So the idea is commit. So I said when you're grading your team's draft, we can get into the whole player versus what our evaluation of the player is. Was it a good pick or a bad pick? But I thought about it a different way, Bob, to just say, does it seem like your team has an internally consistent sense of how we win and what we value? And did they take a draft that reflected those goals. And if you can say yes to both of those things, it was a good draft. Now, we may go back and say the blueprint's a bad blueprint, but the bad organizations are the ones where everyone's pulling in different directions, and it's a mismatch. It's a Frankenstein. It's not something that's going to survive. It's not viable.
And I like the whole draft, by the way. I mean, Byron Murphy. I mean,
that's a great pick.
Right, Deontay
Hakeem Butler.
Maybe got a value on him. So I like an awful lot of what they did. I'm old and mean-spirited, so still somewhat skeptical as to thinking all this works. And again, I will point to Cleveland, where their willingness to switch coaches and quarterbacks on an annual basis didn't pay off until they found the right quarterback. We will find out if Kyler Murray is that guy. I suspect he might be. Look, he's they're watching. I'm not the draft Nick, but have watched enough to see that he seems more than capable. I'm not worried about the height. I mean, it's not like he's there are openings in an offensive line. It's not an impenetrable force field.
No. Look, to run this down, like you said, you want some shares of Kyler Murray. In general, you want some shares of this offense. So I'm going to switch, football / fantasy here. Here's how I see it, Bob. Yes, Kyler Murray, even a casual pedestrian football fan, would watch him and say, having him as your quarterback creates possibilities. You keep the whole field in play because he can escape the pocket, because he can make throws on the move to most spots on the field, so the field stays in play as he's scrambling too. So he makes you defend him as a runner and a passer that's capable of keeping the whole field in play in and outside of the pocket. And you have an air raid scheme that it's now the interesting thing is that things have been converging for this. Air raid concepts continue to be more and more present in the NFL. So why not to an all-in air raid transition? And you add those personnel like Isabella, like Butler, already having Kirk on the roster, David Johnson's, Chase Edmonds, by the way, is a quick
right.
Chase Edmonds fits nicely in this kind of attack too. And the offensive line's bad. They got Sean Kugler, but you can't pin your ears back and go after Kyler Murray when you have 4 wide, because if he pops out of the pocket, you're leaving yourself open to a chunk play. So that makes me not as worried about the quality of the offensive line for fantasy. And in terms of how this offense will perform, even Chip Kelly's offense in the first year was spectacular in terms of creating fantasy value. Guys like Cam Newton, Robert Griffin III, running quarterbacks, when they were introduced to the league as rookies, the league was a step behind. In general, the league, it's like by the end of the year they might solve it, but they're opening up with, I think, is it Matt Patricia? Mm-hmm. You're going to see coaches challenged by how new this is, and there's going to be a lag, and it's going to create some offensive numbers. And I think that if you make a transition, like you said, Steve Keim is still there, which doesn't make much sense. But other than that, they've fully committed. So,
look, it makes sense in Keim. I thought one of their problems last year, like the world saw, one of the problems last year was offensive line, right? And not to be super critical of Steve Keim, I've already been that. But I mean, had he been on the job in August, perhaps he could have been grinding away, adding to that offensive line depth when things started going south. So, he was suspended during that period for the extreme DUI from the year before. So, I see a lot of good things there. And look, I'm tired. I got tired of waiting for Chad Williams, so ready to move on.
Yeah.
Trent Sherfield also. I'm all right, fine. Ricky Seals-Jones, we'll see what he can do. Maybe there is, a connection there that can work out. And if not, maybe Caleb Wilson does. But in the meantime, there's enough front line talent there that I'm pretty happy. But when you mentioned Chase Edmonds, it was funny because I was just working my rankings, before we came on. And that was the name that leapt out to me. I said, damn, too low.
Yeah, he fits. I was doing the same thing, Bob. I was putting him in my running back rankings, and I just had to pause for a second and say, wow, he's a good fit in this kind of offense.
Yeah. And by the way, Arizona does start with Detroit, by the way. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, Matt Patricia, the dinosaur, he's going to be taken off guard by some of this stuff. So, look, for fantasy, I think the keynote is this, and this is actually one of the more important points of your preparation in fantasy this year. Be open to this being a fantasy bonanza. Right. And when it comes to early season waiver wire pickups, if they go out and blitzkrieg Detroit and put up 38 points, then be open to picking up Butler, Isabella, or be open to even adding Chase Edmonds, because there's no rules that, we can't use a running back. You can put David Johnson out in the slot or as an inside receiver and put Edmonds in the backfield. They're going to use the best players they have. So that's exciting. that's exciting. So you talked about doing your early fantasy preparation. So give me something that is jumping out to you where, if you're aware of what the consensus is or what you're sensing out there, where you feel like you're breaking from the consensus early on somebody.
Well, I don't know if I think I'm probably running in the same direction. I haven't been looking at a lot of the consensus yet, but I mean, some of the things that I've seen that I know are going to change, like, I didn't invest heavily in Tariq Cohen, who's currently going off the board 22, right? Wow. Running back 22. I'm thinking that's not a good investment if you made that, right? Because David Montgomery's coming in there, and to me, he's the what they wanted Jordan Howard to be. He's a great between the tackles runner, but he might catch a football or two, right? Which we saw Jordan Howard couldn't do. So I just think, and sorry, Taylor Gabriel, your time is probably done there. And Tariq Cohen turns into Taylor Gabriel. I mean, a higher end,
sure,
but more of a gadget play, and maybe they'll figure out ways to get them both, more active in the game. But I just think that I felt like Matt Nagy wanted Jordan Howard to be more and tried to make him more. And now he has a guy that he can make more. And I'll just chip in Mike Davis.
Mike Davis is good.
Yeah, and if you remember in Seattle last year, he kind of evolved due to injuries and attrition and the rise of both Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. He kind of ended up being a receiving back. He ended up being their third down back. So he's kind of capable of handling that more versatile role as well. So I think that's a guy that, kind of I'm thinking, wow, this draft didn't go well for him. I'm also thinking, I've been kind of all in on Sony Michel going into this draft. The Patriots, make one great move that I feel like N'Keal Harry was a great pick. I feel like he fills a need for them in terms of red zone targets, right? They just don't have that guy. And to be fair, Gronk wasn't it last year, right? We had like 3 red zone targets, but they just didn't have that red zone presence. And I think N'Keal Harry gives them that, assuming he can, meet the obligations. And the obligations are simple. Be where Tom Brady wants you to be when Tom Brady wants you to be there.
Right.
If you can do that, you will be wildly successful, according to Julian Edelman. But that backfield, that Damien Harris move, just, it was soul crushing. It was as patriotish as it gets. And I'm still processing it. I think, Rex Burkhead obviously seems like odd man out all of a sudden to me, and maybe not. So I don't know. And I thought, so the Patriots are going to continue to be problematic. The Eagles backfield is going to continue to be problematic. The Redskins, I'm not sure what to make of the Bryce Love edition.
I think the Redskins. One thing that I think, if I can interject, Bob,
please,
is it helps your preparation in fantasy football sometimes if you just take a whole team or 3 or 4 and say, I'm not even going to bother with this team, because the chances of anybody greatly exceeding expectations, there are players that could exceed expectations. There's profit to be had somewhere in the Washington offensive depth chart.
Miami.
Right. Miami's another good example, unless, of course, you have still a bit of smitten with Kenyon Drake, Bob, because you can say, but now he's going to have a coach that's going to let him go. We'll see. But you're right. The point is, we're going to look through some teams where we can take the marker and go, I don't like Buffalo was like that last year, although Josh Allen and Robert Foster just summoned up some value where you say, I'm not even, and I think that's where Washington is. But you touched on some good stuff, and we're thinking, what I like that you're doing, Bob, you're sage and wise to present it this way, is you're thinking short term and long term.
Right.
You're thinking redraft, like what am I thinking about right now? But you're also thinking about where's this going? So you mentioned 3 situations. I want to touch on them. You go back and dig just a little quicker and get maybe something like semi-actionable, right? So Chicago. And you mentioned Philadelphia too, and for that matter, even the Patriots. All these offenses, and I think one of the new trends in fantasy football is going to be is not just running back by committee, but offense by committee.
Right,
8 to 10 players touch the ball every week. The game plan changes based on rational coaching to beat that opponent that week, and our skill is going to be trying to project that coach how they're going to attack that defense and which players are going to be featured.
That's the key, and so. And it takes me back briefly to Arizona, where, Cliff Kingsbury, with his connections to the Patriots, he's talked about, he goes, look, I learned there to be week to week game plan is going to depend solely on the opponent. I think, that's the direction this is going. And it used to be a thing, I think, where when I was first getting into this, it was so easy to figure out what teams were going to do. Because given the week-to-week...
This is what we do, and we do it every week. And if you can stop us, then good on you. But that's how we play football.
Right, and it was part of that was the head coach. Like everything changes every week,
Right.
right? The opponent, the venue, all the things. And the head coach's job was to keep as much the same as he could.
Oh yeah.
And now that's out the window. So it does present challenges to us. And you talk about the Philadelphia situation. I mean, think back to last year. Every time you thought somebody was suddenly the running back, Deuce Staley would get a microphone shoved in his face, say, "We do a committee."
Yeah. Okay. So let's drill down on these, and it's great though. And one of the things is an aside, both with draft scouting and all of these football analysis skills and observations and things like that. If what you're talking about is you had the coach is keeping things the same, and the game plan's the same every week. They can figure out a way to thwart it. Well, then they're the better team. But this is how we play football.
Right.
If you go to a league where the offensive game plans change week to week to match Warren Sharp has written about this too, that sometimes it's more important to play against your opponent's weakness than it is to play to your strength.
Yeah.
Then what matters for players becomes more important, because it isn't just being good at this job that you get hammered to do day after week and just getting that right. When you think about fits in the draft, this guy's a mauler, he's going to help with their power running game. But if you're morphing from week to week, then it's the players that are malleable, players that are versatile, that the players that have great awareness and football IQ that become more important. And then the players.
For fantasy owners, our ability to divine those situations and circumstances in advance is going to be the premiums on that. I mean, if you're wanting to win in DFS, those are the things you're going to have to figure out.
DFS is ahead of the curve here, because this is basically playing DFS. Yeah.
Right. Those matchups are going to be a big deal. Obviously not as much in redraft and dynasty, where I've been doing a bunch of dynasty drafting. I know you have too. And we're doing a rookie draft right now, a mock that's, kind of interesting. But I do think that's the direction this is going, and the way the personnel is playing out, and some of what we saw in this draft. Even Darrell Henderson going to the Rams. We think about that one. I don't think that's just insurance for Gurley, although he can be that too, right?
Yeah.
But it's more than that. This is about challenging opponents differently each week.
Yeah, and San Francisco's going this direction. Indy's doing it well. Okay, so let's talk about these situations specifically and get to something like potentially semi-actionable, because I'm doing the same thing you're doing, that a lot of us are doing, chewing on this stuff for the first time and seeing how it tastes. Your first reaction. Chicago. So you mentioned Mike Davis, who's a good running back, who they replaced Jordan Howard with him because he can run. He can be a good runner, and like you mentioned, his receiving skills really showed up late. And Davis is interesting to go back to, because there was Davis 2 years before the draft looked like a good NFL running back. Davis, the year he entered the draft, didn't. Right. And we're seeing the good Davis, by the way. That's how that is turning out.
Right. He's got to stay healthy.
But they're interchangeable. In some ways, in the passing game for sure, although Cohen can do more downfield. David Montgomery I didn't love because he doesn't have much in the way of burst, but he's great at breaking tackles. He's an excellent advanced receiver. But the point is this, that we think the blueprint of Chicago is going to be to use all three of these guys each week. And the only way you're going to get predictable, consistent production is if one or two of them get hurt.
Right.
Like any other, you could say that about Giovanni Bernard. You could say that about a lot of players, that if the other guy gets hurt, they'll have value. The
7 guys they drafted in Cincinnati. Jeez.
Right. I know. So it sounds like Chicago, there's no strong buy issuance on any Chicago running back this year.
No, I think, and this happens a lot, especially in redraft for me, is, as I'm looking at these guys, and we'll see it in San Francisco as well, is you start looking at the values. Or what am I paying? Who am I getting cheaper? What's the cheapest of this trio?
Mike Davis.
How much cheaper? And, so Mike Davis is going to be the cheapest guy. Is it going to be cheap enough for me to nibble on him, or, keep me from being as interested in the 2 ahead of him? And we know attrition is going to happen at some point. But right now, you go with what you know as the plan. And I think David Montgomery is plan A. Tariq Cohen continues being Tariq Cohen. And there's some value in that, but it's going to be week to week, kind of dependent on game plan and circumstance. And so I'm going to probably be more buying into David Montgomery, who I think, I will not be alone. So the price will raise. And at some point, the old skinflint in me will be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, you have to also think of it in terms of backfields. And this is not necessarily a great backfield to chase points. It wasn't like they were a run-heavy team last year as it was. Right. And Cohen was kind of exciting for these outbursts he would have as a receiver. But if there's someone else to get those targets in Montgomery and Davis, then that makes it tougher to go. So let's turn the page to the Philadelphia backfield. Now, what's interesting about Philadelphia, in contrast to Chicago, where Howard just came from, is that there is diversity in Philadelphia. And what I'm finding myself in our first pass at football guys, Bob, as the highest on Miles Sanders. And I wasn't even a huge Miles Sanders fan if you compare me to other people looking at players pre-draft. He reminds me of Ryan Matthews to an extent, which isn't a bad thing. I'm sure he doesn't have Ryan Matthews' nature of being injury prone.
Hopefully.
But with a second-round pick, they are using second-round pick they got from Baltimore in the Lamar Jackson trade last year. That's a premium pick. That's the second running back off the board. In this year's draft, that's a premium pick. And maybe the blueprint of, remember, flexibility above all, right? So if our blueprint at running back is we're flexible because we have 4 guys that we can use in different roles. But if you get one guy that can do all the roles like Miles Sanders, and by them investing that draft capital in him, does that signal that, hey, if Sanders is as good as they think he is, then he may turn this into a backfield with a primary back this year?
I'd love to think so. We have not seen evidence of that yet, though. And that's been my issue. And
Are you open to it?
I'm open to it. Sure. Look, I was open to it last year. It just turns out Deuce Staley was not.
But they didn't have anybody like Sanders last year.
That's true. And injuries were a factor as well last year. I think anytime someone seemed to be.
What would happen with Ajay? Didn't he have like 3 touchdowns in the first 2 weeks?
Right.
And got pretty promptly hurt. Because the thing about the Eagles situation is, you're buying an outstanding offensive line and an outstanding offensive brain trust. And Bob, when I was looking at my pre-draft and post-draft rankings in Bloom 100, those were factors I tried to really break out, along with opportunity and the overall quality of their teammates and situation. But I really was looking at how good is this offense?
Right, and it's going to be fantastic. Look, they've added more pieces that are going to make it more fantastic. Much of this is going to hinge on Carson Wentz, of course. Because there is no more Nick Foles. And so, I mean, obviously they have a strong feeling about this. Look, if I'm drafting today, I'm targeting Miles Sanders because he's going to be a cheaper option than the other frontline guys coming out. I'm going to get him. Right. I'm feeling like I'm going to have a good value with him.
6th, 7th, 8th round. I don't know where he's going to go, but you're not going to have to at this point until if there's buzz that he's the starter, then all of a sudden he becomes a 2nd or 3rd round pick or something like that.
Right. So if you're drafting now, jump in on that and get a piece of it while the values are still a little bit skewed, or at least the uncertainty is keeping us from knowing what's going on. I think that, and I think, Jordan Howard's still going to be the big name there. So unless you're a draft Nick type person, you're not going to have that much knowledge of Miles Sanders. And, it was not an extensive body of work at Penn State because of the Saquon Barkley. I mean, I think that works in his favor as well. I'm just looking. I just did a redraft the other day, and let me see where he went. Wow, 7th round. So ended 7th round. So
that's worth it because you're buying a share you're buying the most talented running back in a backfield that has arguably the best offensive line in the league, or one of the 2 or 3 best, with a great offensive brain trust around him. And you brought up Darrell Henderson. So I just want to turn the page to him. We're just running backs, rookies. This seems to be the topic on the mind at the moment. But the more I look at Henderson, the more I'm interested. I'm excited. And I know Sean McVay said Lance Dunbar, and they envisioned him in a change of pace role. But look, Sean McVay's not an idiot. He's going to see that, I think, and this is me bringing in my evaluation, which is my evaluation, that Henderson is more than that. Henderson's more than Lance Dunbar. Henderson is a very exciting player, especially in an offense that creates these large – we saw it with Todd Gurley, the large lanes. Darrell Henderson is the chunk player from the running back class this year, the guy who can score from any touch, from anywhere on the field. And I think this year, Bob, when we talk about dynasty, I'm trying to, in some ways, simplify my outlook and simply look at, is this a good organization that's developing its talent well? And is this a team that has showed has the foundation of offensive success? And the one guy, Harry, I'm going maybe slightly counter just because I think that what Harry offers in terms of contested catches, run after catches, aren't that important elements compared to getting open on your route in the current NFL. It's just a side. I'm getting off on a tangent. But you give an offense like the Rams Henderson, and they're going to make something happen. And then you have the Todd Gurley knee situation. So, I mean, Henderson could Bob, he could be a league winner by the end of this year. I mean, didn't we just see at the end of the year that C.J. Anderson was one of the most? So the other guy, the guy other than Gurley,
the guy that rolled off the couch,
right,
and
right,
had to have a jersey alteration to get it on.
He was putting up week winning numbers
right.
as the guy that's not Gurley last year. So why would we not want to draft the guy that's not Gurley this year? And whether we're talking about redraft or dynasty, I mean, it seems like maybe, and I'm seeing him going in the mid-second round of rookie drafts. I think that I'm by far the highest in our redraft rankings. I mean, I think I'm on one of just a few saying that it's even worth picking him. Am I getting getting carried away with myself on this?
I don't think so. Look, it's the uncertainty for Gurley alone, and I I don't want to overblow it, but certainly there's something there. We saw it last year, right? I mean, we saw it early in the year. We saw it at times. They were having to manage it during the season, in practices, and then at the end of the year, obviously it was to the point where C.J. Anderson became a thing. So look, I agree with you 100%. I think everything you said is true. He went in the 9th round, by the way, in the mock that I just did last Sunday. And I know in the rookie draft, what did he go? 2nd round. So I'm surprised he didn't go higher in that draft. I'll be honest with you. But I think he is a guy who's well positioned. And what we learn in fantasy football every year is the same thing we learned the year before, is that some running back is going to win you a league that you didn't expect to win you that league. Said C.J. Anderson, said Justin Forsett, said, every year it's somebody.
Right. But often we can at least narrow down not necessarily the back, but the situations.
Right.
That can
and this is one of those
back.
situations where there's a lot of pieces in place that maybe open the door for that. And on top of the fact that it's a very good offense, and some of his skills will fit in well in that offense, regardless of whether Todd Gurley's there or not.
Yeah, and I'm finding myself fascinated. Thank you, Matt Waldman, for the encouraging us on Darwin Thompson. Because it's a situation. You're buying a share of the situation.
Right.
Like, let's just keep this simple. If you can buy like, this idea of who's cheapest, and that's a really great. Bob, that would be an excellent thing for someone to do a data study. Hey, everyone, if you're listening out there, this would be an excellent data study. It's just go back to these multi-back backfields, because running back by committee is more the default, and lead back is more the exception now. And just say, if you took the cheapest one in your draft, not even looking at anything more than that, how much would you profit compared to that if you took the most expensive one? And I think you're right that if you just gave this oversimplistic advice in these multi-back backfields, as long as it's a good offense, you want to get a share of a good offense, take the cheapest Eagles back, take the cheapest Bears back, take the cheapest Chiefs back, as long as they're on the roster.
The proviso there is that you have, some steady guys in front of them, right?
Right, but these are your bench spots. These are the guys you're looking at to fill out your bench. Mike Davis,
for me,
Darwin
this is
Thompson,
the best ball tactic all day long, right? I mean, I'll do this all day long. I'll go early, in the early rounds, I'll get those steady eddies. I'll get the reliable workload guys. But when we get later on, I'm looking at, and I see that San Francisco backfield. Let's see let's see who the last man standing is, and I'll dive in on that.
Right. Speaking of Kansas City,
James Williams.
Wait, yeah, or even James Williams. No. Bob, I'm formulating in my head, Bob, an article that's basically like, for the true degenerates out there that just can't get enough of this stuff. Here is your viewer guide to OTAs and rookie minicamp, and here are the most important rookie minicamp position battles. And James Williams and Darwin Thompson, who stands out. This stuff is important, folks. I'm going back to the Adam Thielen. There's certain things, Bob, I repeat to the point that people get tired of me. But Adam Thielen was a tryout player in the rookie minicamp, and he roasted Xavier Rhodes, and people said, whoa, including in the White Vikings organization. So you can get important things by the initial impressions that these players leave in that rookie minicamp and in OTAs. So pay attention. You can learn things over the next few months about these players' careers. Go ahead.
I say this all the time, and we probably have this conversation every year about this time, is the things that I heard in February and then I saw in May that back up what the coaches were saying at the combine. Because whatever the case, the combine is where you glean a lot of information, every coach and every GM. And they give a lot of tells, and then you watch, and if you can see that repeated, what you see happening in May and June is something you can bank on. And we get caught up in that minute by minute, looking through the drinking straw, in the minute by minute, literally in August, right? I mean, oh, this guy had a good play. And we're drafting based on that. Think back to what you knew in May, and it tends to come true. So some of the things we're talking about now, and some of the players that are going to flash in these mini camps are going to be names worth remembering.
And also the first signs of what all these new offensive coordinators are going to do.
Yeah.
On that topic of how efficient, smart, flexible, innovative are the offensive minds in charge of the offense that these players play in. And I think that that's something that we are going to continue to have to understand to correctly value these players. Their value is a function of their surroundings. And offensive line and the quality of the mind calling the shots are important. Other things, God, there's so many things, just because we're at that point now where you can look out and you can see that vast field ahead of us, Bob. Let's drill down to Kansas City though again, and the fallout from Tyreek Hill. We're not, you know, I mean, it sort of seems like from the outside that we should not see Tyreek Hill on an NFL field again. We'll see if that comes to pass. I don't think we're going to see him this year.
I don't either.
I think we can certainly ensure that. So, is it over exuberance to want? Look, full disclosure, Bob. Mecole Hardman is my number one dynasty wide receiver in this class, and maybe
was he before the Tyreek Hill?
No, but he was like number 8 or number 9.
Okay,
he was my number 19 overall rookie at that time. I liked Hardman, and I actually even mentioned on this show with Waldman a week or two before the draft that if they're worried about Tyreek Hill, that was the state it was in then, that Hardman would be a player they could look to draft to replace the element that he adds to the offense.
Right, I thought it would be Marquise Brown. I thought they'd go right out of the gate.
They just didn't have a first because
exactly.
Frank Clark trade. But yes, and it could have been Brown if they had Frank Clark. The trade had not made that trade. But okay, again, on the exuberant scale, for dynasty or for redraft, or this is something again where I look at it as putting a chip on Patrick Mahomes and this offensive line. They lost Mitch Morse, and the decision makers. I'm comfortable with that, but am I not focusing enough on the player, or otherwise am I looking at this the wrong way?
No, you're looking at this the right way. Look, I think especially in the current world of fantasy football we have to be aggressive. There are no secrets from everyone. Everyone's out there grinding on the same things we're grinding on. They're listening to us talk now. They're listening to all kinds of people talk. They're reading all kinds of and consuming all kinds of content. They're very knowledgeable. So you have to be aggressive and be forward thinking. And I think this is, look, the Chiefs are telling you what's going on here with this move. And what kind of trust do we have in the Chiefs and their personnel people? Look, character issues aside, they tend to fare pretty well in terms of finding people who fit their system, right? I mean, This according to Pat Mahomes, this according to Damien Williams, this according to pretty much any running back they plug into that offense, right? So to me, as soon as I saw where he went, then yes, he rocketed up my rankings. And, the measurables are all, very similar to Tyreek Hill. And in addition, the size, the speed, the role, I want to get in front of this. If for no other reason, you want a piece of whatever Patrick Mahomes is dishing out. And it appears that Mecole Hardman is in good position or well positioned to get a chunk of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, go ahead.
And look, it's easy to, we laugh about Sammy Watkins being hurt. And you know how I feel about 2015 Sammy Watkins. I jump in my time machine every day and go watch that 9-game stretch of the Bills. And he was phenomenal. Best receiver in the game.
Who was throwing the ball? Was it Tyrod Taylor?
Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah. So what could he do with Patrick Mahomes? And you can think of it like the player is like the size of the receptacle, the cup or the bowl, but the Mahomes in the offense is like the size of the ladle that dishes out the good nourishing soup. So maybe that cup might be smaller because Hardman's a rookie. It's much smaller than the size of Hill, but the amount that he can get poured in there is going to be great. And I think that's one of the ways to look at Hardman. And if it's not Hardman, remember DeMarcus Robinson. And part of the picture here, if you're valuing Hardman, of course, is Sammy Watkins and his injury history. He's only under contract for 2 more years. So if we're taking a longer view, that plays into.
And look, my expectations for Sammy Watkins are him not playing an entire season, right? That should be the baseline expectation.
Yes.
And maybe you get some, the candle that's burning on both ends. It burns very bright, and we'll get some great games.
It can accelerate.
But the target shares were there when he was healthy last year, even with Hill. So whether Hardman is playing or not, I think Hardman can still get something done. And you look at the other guys there, DeMarcus Robinson. Seems like a serviceable guy, but just a guy so far, with brief flashes. And Sammy Coates has not even shown me that much.
Right. Well, Robinson is interesting because he was another character risk guy. He's only 24. He's going to turn 25. Physically talented. His ceiling, at least as an NFL receiver, is probably a little higher than his 4th-round draft pedigree indicates. But as you mentioned, the baseline for Sammy Watkins is projecting him to play less than 16 games. With 1 year of data in, I would contend that should also be the case with Sony Michel, because he missed time twice last year. So that makes Damien Harris really interesting, because Damien Harris is good, competent, at least in every facet of the game. So they're going to like him in New England. What we hoped Donald Brown could have become. I know he got that one last chance in New England, but what he could have become as a 1st-round pick. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I agree 100% with what you're saying. And these are all situations where, in part we're drafting, again, the situation. I think that's the broader point, and I think it's the point people should take away as you're listening, is you are trying to draft them, not necessarily the personnel. Look, we can go back to a couple of years ago when I was all over Jordan Howard in July, right? Because why? Because John Fox, because Howard's size, because the situation of the offense, and I mean, those offenses aren't being run anymore, nor should they, according to, what we've seen from John Fox, Jeff Fisher. Yeah. I mean, those schemes are thinking about, although Seattle seems to be looking to revive that.
Let me tell you the great take, and I'm sorry I can't give credit to the person who gave this take, but it was great. DK Metcalf will force teams to not go single high at safety because there's him and Tyler Lockett to put that stress on defenses.
Right.
So the Seahawks will see defenses with 2 high at safety, which is the prime formation to run the ball. So they got DK Metcalf so they could run the ball.
They're just doing more of what they want to do. Yeah. And I mean, look, this is not this is shocking development with Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays. But I also think, for Russell Wilson, it kind of plays into his skill set with that great deep ball he throws. Those arcing passes are phenomenal, and maybe that works for DK Metcalf. I don't think, I love the line Mike Clay had on Tyler Lockett. He broke math. I mean, it's just, that level of efficiency seems hard to achieve. But, if Metcalf can threaten the opponents deep like that, I mean, it is going to open some things up for some other guys, but primarily for the rushing attack.
Yeah. Well, and what you like there, and look, this is, again, trying to wrap your mind around this. And I ended up with Metcalf, I think 4th or 5th overall in my rookies, higher than most people, because yes, the volume of targets in this offense is going to be low, but they're Russell Wilson targets. Like, would you rather have your rookie receiver or your receiver over the arc of his career, getting 90 Russell Wilson targets or 115 Derek Carr targets?
Yeah, it's not hard to figure
out.
Not
all targets are created
equal.
Back
to the early Derek Carr. I mean,
maybe not. Yeah, that's true.
I'm trying to hang my hat on something in Oakland because I still have shares of Antonio Brown. But I mean, you go back the first 2 seasons, only Dan Marino threw more touchdowns over the first 2 seasons of a career than Derek Carr. I mean, that's more than guys like Peyton Manning. I mean, and Russell Wilson. I mean, so there's and it's certainly irrational hope because Derek Carr has turned into something else since then, and maybe he can regain that magic with a new cast of characters supporting him. But I do think Russell Wilson is a guy that, I mean, just that beautiful deep ball. Look, I'm giving him a fair amount of responsibility for Tyler Lockett's numbers last year.
Exactly.
The perfect passer rating.
Tyler Lockett's good, but he ain't that good. The reason those targets are so valuable was Wilson.
Think about Will Dissly before he got hurt, right? What was he doing? Scoring touchdowns every time you saw him.
Right, a combination of Wilson's mobility, his field vision and awareness, his accuracy. His targets are arguably as valuable. Maybe it'd be interesting if someone ran the numbers, like whose targets on this slide, but him or Mahomes. Okay, so we talked about Oakland, and hey, you said new characters: Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams, Trent Brown. That could be a big one, although they lost Kelechi Assembly. But that's still, it's Gruden, it's Greg Olsen, Seattle, it's Schottenheimer, it's Seattle. At this time of year when we're taking our initial stances, Bob, what I spend the most time wrestling with are the things that have changed. The things where we're solving for X and we don't know the equation yet. The new offensive coordinators. The Arizona situation we already touched on is a good one. Of things that are changing. What's fascinating you? What is catching your eye and making you stare longer because you're not quite sure what to expect from a player or a unit or a team this year?
The 2 McVay-related coaching changes, right? The Cincinnati Bengals with Zach Taylor. Look, you'd like to think about, I mean, it's been a long haul with Marvin Lewis. Not exactly an innovative mind in the on the offensive side of the ball, not looking in that direction. And that's obviously what Zach Taylor wants to be. So, look, I don't know if Andy Dalton is the guy to do that. They have another guy who maybe is more along the lines, of what they're looking for in Lindley. So we'll see what goes on there. But I just think it's interesting to see they've added over to the offensive line over the last 2 years. I like that. Joe Mixon, they've added some more players at running back. But you think about AJ Green. I mean, he has not played for an offensive-minded head coach his entire career. It'll be nice to see what goes on, and I'm interested to see, of course, what goes on in Green Bay. With Coach Rodgers' new staff coming in and see what they can do working with him.
So on Cincinnati, what could be actionable here? And they got Brian Callahan, who I think Brian Callahan was a pretty coveted name, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Zach Taylor wasn't, but if it's Zach Taylor kind of calling the shots because he's cheap, and Brian Callahan's a good offensive mind, they added Jonah Williams. That's an
and I said Ryan Finley because I'm thinking of the old Arizona quarterback. I meant Ryan Finley.
Right. Efficient. Finley and Brett Rippon were the two quarterbacks that were efficient, smart, like ideal backups.
Well, could you say a comp to Jared Goff?
Sure. Execute. Well, I call them extension of the coach quarterbacks. You just do what you're put out there to do. You harvest the value of the plays. You don't add a lot of value, but you don't lose a lot of value either. Andy Dalton has been this kind of quarterback. Kirk Cousins is this kind of quarterback. So Cincinnati, I guess the interesting side here is, well, Joe Mixon, and in this time that we have to remember to be sensitive to knowing these players' backgrounds and incidents, but just on the field, Joe Mixon, you couldn't ask him to do much more last year. No. And the arrow's pointing up there. And adding Jonah Williams, this offensive line bottomed out 2 years ago. Now you got Jonah Williams. Remember, Billy Price was hurt coming into the year last year, their first-round pick there. So things could get better.
Just getting rid of Bobby Hart.
Oh,
lineup.
We were reacting to that on draft night. Like, that was just so bizarre, and it's glad that they can undo. Like, we got our right tackle. No, you don't. Now you do. Jonah Williams. So maybe this offense could have a resurgence.
And AJ Green, if he can stay healthy. Look, we all loved what we saw in Tyler Boyd last year.
Yep. John Ross. John Ross gets a new chance without Marvin Lewis there.
A little optimism of the unknown there. I mean, I'm not.
Well, at least to make the offense go better. Even if Ross is, and he knew, at least he had a penchant for catching touchdowns last year.
Look, I'm a big believer in the optimism of the unknown. We know how much John Ross sucked under the previous regime. We don't know how much he might improve under this one.
Right.
I want to see some signs of it. I'm willing to take a look. And look, Tyler Eifert, God bless him. It's been a struggle, but we know what the high end is if he's on the field. I'm not recommending drafting that or. Obviously everyone has value at the right price, but could he be a great chess piece in this offense, in any offense he's in?
Yeah, he should be, yeah.
If he's on the field, then that opens things up for the other guys. So I agree with you. The combination of addition, the buildup of the offensive line over the last 2 years is something Zach Taylor's going to be able to take advantage of. Plenty of talent and speed on the outside that he's going to be able to take advantage of, and a super high-end backfield that they added to with Travion Williams and Rodney Anderson, who may, look, I don't know what we can expect from these guys, but if they get on the field, Rodney Anderson, when he's healthy, is a terror.
He's good. It must be that the league just said his body's broken, but you never know. And then you mentioned Green Bay. And Green Bay is probably, and again, we can talk up the optimistic take, and I'm probably guilty of this on every situation or every player, but you can't take them all. 20 rounds or 18 rounds or 16 rounds in a draft. So, and we can paint a much more optimistic picture in Green Bay too. We can talk about, well, how much was Mike McCarthy holding back Aaron Rodgers, or how much was just the tension between them and the tug of war holding back this team and this offense. They had Jenkins from Mississippi State, an excellent interior lineman, instant upgrade on the offensive line, which
needed some help at tackle.
Needed some help. That's good. It's into these interior offensive line picks. I love what the Saints did to get their hole at center fit. Also with Eric McCoy, but you look. I mean, Devontae Adams is already priced out. They got Jay Sternberger, maybe not this year, but can remember that name. He could be the most valuable tight end from this class in fantasy terms. I'm not sure who's going to emerge. I mean, I guess where's the profit? Is it Rodgers? If we like what he and LaFleur are doing when we tune in and hear how they're getting along?
Right, I think so. Yeah, and look, there's going to be guys that maybe if someone can establish that chemistry with Rodgers and the trust. I mean, Geronimo Allison has it, right? He's just got to stay on the field, or he appears to have it at least more than the youngsters did on this team last year. And I think you're taking your chances if you go to beyond Devontae Adams in this passing attack. It's Rodgers and Adams. Everything else, you're throwing a little bit of a dart. I mean, that includes Jimmy Graham as well, until Jay Sternberger comes along. I think what you're hoping is that maybe LaFleur learned some lessons in Tennessee last year about making heavy use of the running game. It will take some pressure off, and maybe Aaron Jones can come through and make good on our expectations. And maybe part of that is my own, hopes and desires that I'd like to see this guy. I'd like to see this guy with a full workload. I'd like to see if he can stay healthy with a full workload over the course of a season, or give us some part of that. So those are the things that I'll be looking for with this offense. But most of all, it's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's where you're going to get a little bit of a discount on him.
It maybe this is he internalizes it, and this is you like that moment, the moment that he quiets all the doubters. Did you, by the way, just to go back to that, the Ty Dunn piece?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think, or did it strike you at all reading that and then watching the reactions and the reactions to the reactions, as a lot has happened in this offseason? It's been pretty exciting in terms of developments of offseason. That was a big one to me.
Right. First, great piece by Tyler Dunn. I mean, and good on Bleacher.
Can we just say, as an aside, how respected people that pay attention, how respected he is? Like, he's just doing this to further his career or something like that. That nothing could be further from the truth for someone like him.
Right. So a couple things on that. He is getting players, past teammates, to talk on the record. I mean, not everyone did, but it's good to, I think when you see a story like this and you see all the behind the people who aren't putting their names on their quotes, you don't really get that context that you do when you see what a Greg Jennings is saying, what you see what a Ryan Grant is saying, when you see what Jermichael Finley is saying. You can, it adds that layer of context to understanding what the relationships are with these guys. So I thought that was very helpful. But beyond that, I just think, what did we learn? Aaron Rodgers is a jerk. Well, this is not news. Yeah. This was not news, right? We knew this, and he's a competitive guy. A quarterback being an alpha kind of guy, a driven person who doesn't put up with any shenanigans or wants things exactly how he wants them. Look, I think that's, we've seen that Josh Rosen get that, same knock coming in, that he's kind of a dick. Well, okay, so he is. What about it? Deal with it. And I think that's the same with Aaron Rodgers. So I thought it was fascinating that it, maybe revealed what we already kind of suspected, or certainly should have suspected based on what we've heard from him. But I think the big thing was the relationship between he and McCarthy, which, you think about the best quarterbacks in football, the guys that really make a difference, the frontline guys, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Manning's, the Drew Breeses, these guys, you consider them as extensions of the coaches on the field. I think that's a very key thing for success. I kind of viewed Rodgers as that, but maybe I needed to dig a little deeper and realize that it was more Rodgers than McCarthy. But some of the things that that you hear, look, I mean, is it a surprise that a quarterback wants his receivers to do what he wants them to do? I mean, not really. I mean, I talked about it in the New England thing. The key to success there for receivers, be where Tom Brady wants you to be when he wants you to be there. That's the key. That's going to be the key for these guys coming into Green Bay. We'll see how much they've surrounded. They've got some coaches in there that seem to be, I mean, Nathaniel Hackett, whatever you think of the offenses he's called, is kind of a no-nonsense guy, right? Kind of a type A tough guy. The same with the quarterback's coach who's worked with Rodgers before, Luke Gesty, about the same age. And so there are a lot of guys about the same age, but they've been around a while. They kind of know how things work. I think LaFleur is the guy that I have the most questions about, and we'll get the answers pretty quickly from the reporting, because everyone's going to be watching like hawks thanks to that Dunn piece.
Yeah, and maybe that even changes Rodgers' approach to this being something.
Hey, look, sometimes we need that, right? Yeah. We need that slap in the face and read. Oh, this is what I am. Damn, maybe I need to adjust.
It just struck me too how much what was revealed matched what we expected. Mike McCarthy was too conservative, that the players didn't believe in him. And like you said, we like to think of the offensive coaching and the quarterback play as an alignment. And when we watch a good offense like the Rams, you see that alignment and it's beautiful. But sometimes it can also be like mom and dad are fighting. Right. You watch an offense, and sometimes, especially last year, the inexplicable nature of the way Rodgers was playing and the way the plays looked, it makes sense. Go ahead.
How much more Aaron Jones do we see? Because
I hope
maybe
a lot.
Rodgers realizes, oh, look, I can't audible every single play, right?
Yeah.
And so,
and the establishment of the pecking order, because you mentioned Tom Brady, and you have to be where Tom Brady wants to be. But I want to point out something. We're getting close to the end of the hour here, Bob. This is great. We're getting started. Tom Brady, there was a Martellus Bennett anecdote.
Yes, I saw that.
And Martellus Bennett said it was about Brady getting chewed out by Belichick, and in front of everyone. And Martellus Bennett said, "It's the first team that I ever felt like everyone was equal." How much of that is an element in how this team goes to 9 Super Bowls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in team building and buy-in and all 100%. Those things? Yeah.
Look, it goes back to reading Michael Hawley's book, Patriot Reign, right? I mean, that was our first behind-the-scenes look at that organization where the writer really had total access, and you could really see and talk about before the one Super Bowl, I believe it was against the Rams, where he got him, and somebody had said something, someone had made a comment, bulletin board material, and Belichick got up in front of that team and holding up the piece of newspaper and berated the whole batch of them. I mean, that's how, and he doesn't play favorites. He hates everyone equally, just like I hate all teams equally, right? I mean, and I think but you look at the culture there that they've created and how players buy in. It's a symbiotic kind of thing. It's a synergistic thing where, I mean, the success is what leads people to buy in. The people buying in is what leads to the success. And Belichick being willing to rip his quarterback and say, I wish we had a guy who could throw, right? I mean, and Brady's response to this is also key. He doesn't sit there and get his feelings hurt. He goes out and destroys the defense the next day, according to Bennett. So I think these are, it takes a combination of the right kind of people, the competitive nature of those people. But when you foster an atmosphere where people all feel like, the players all feel like everyone's on the same level, right? We're all the same guy. It doesn't matter how much you make, what your name is, what you've done before. Today is what matters.
It's unfiltered, but it's all taken in good faith. Yep. And it reminds me of from that Pepper Johnson piece that he talked about, that the deal with Belichick is he really takes everybody's input as an assistant coach. Now, he might just say in the moment of truth, like, I'm going to go the other way. So that he has ultimate power, but you feel that sense of your input being welcome and rewarded and considered.
Look, I mean, I went from running a business to working in a business, and I felt like, making that transition was easy. Kudos to Michalek. But I mean, look, it turns out I didn't care what the decision was as long as I was heard, right? Listen to my idea, pay attention to it. And I think that, that extends out to all of us. As long as your input is being taken into account, we can live with the decision to go with it or go against it. And I think the Patriots are an ideal example of that. Look, they do weird things. I mean, not naming the defensive coordinator. And there's things that I don't get, but I cannot argue with the results.
Well, and some of that stuff, Bob, is that we shouldn't assume that the classic organizational chart of coaches is correct. Everything's innovating in the NFL. Why not the coaching organizational chart? Well, I loved seeing the last few years, Bob, a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator, because it makes sense that those aren't necessarily overlapping skill sets.
Right. We're seeing a lot more of that. I think it's kind of a growing trend, and I'm on board with it as well.
And the Patriots do things like the offensive line coach is in charge of short yardage calls at the goal line or something like that. Don't quote me on the specifics, but they also chop up parts of the game plan. So you're a position coach and you're in charge of some part of the game plan too. So it's all in these digestible chunks that are suited to your strengths and your areas of expertise and where you really understand the pulse of your team. And who's to say that's not a much better way to organize your coaches than the way that it's been done before? So of course they're going to do things differently.
Results suggest it works well.
Yeah. Well, and what works well is not the specific thing. This is why like the Belichick disciples don't necessarily work, because it isn't doing it the way Belichick did. It's having the open-mindedness, flexibility, humility to steal from other people, to pay attention. I'm going to say this so many times, you're going to get sick of it, that when they asked Belichick about draft thresholds, he said, he said something to the effect of like, you need to change your thresholds when you get beat by a player over and over again. You need to learn how to defend that kind of player or add that kind of element. So he just is humble. He'll admit,
right,
they got me.
And I see some of that in Sean McVay, and it's no surprise that you hear that he and Belichick are communicate often and seem to be on the same wavelength. You see some of that in some of these younger coaches, and look, you would hope that you would, and we'll see if some of these guys that are coming from I want to call it the McVay tree. I think we should probably call it the Shanahan tree, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And then you can start going back like the Bill Walsh, or it all
Right.
comes back to that singularity. Somehow it ends up in Las Vegas, but better than Las Vegas. The real singularity here, Bob, because we're coming up against it. But why are box turtles so great to have in your life?
They're really amazing. They're friendly. They're friendlier than you think. The sex is raucous. I thought someone was getting killed in my backyard.
It's aggressive.
I have baby turtles. I had no idea. No, I love turtles. They're very calming, relaxing. You just sit out there and you watch them. I just find myself fascinated by how they move around, what they're doing, what they're eating. It's just, it's almost like you've let a little piece of prehistory into your backyard.
Absolutely. I've always loved reptiles. And, you're in Albuquerque. I spent when I was 2 or 3 to 7 in New Mexico, including in Albuquerque. I loved horny toads for the same reason. Always loved it across. I had a pet toad. I had a pet ball python.
There's a level of prehistoricness that
it's respect because it lasts. It's a respect for endurance. It's a respect for being able to survive all of these different eras of geologic history. And if folks have to figure out, Bob has box turtles. We've got box turtles here. Love my life, Kate. Her mom had them in El Paso. And we've got the descendants of them here. We built a little turtle garden out on our New Orleans balcony. We're playing God with all of our we're growing food for them and things in there. But it is so much fun to watch them.
And we're going to do a box turtle podcast.
This is it. So you're hearing, folks, you're hearing it from the debut right now. You're hearing the debut right now. But reptile lovers out there, to box turtle lovers, because we're learning, and Bob, we're learning stuff about. We've got a worm farm, but also you got to vary the diet. So there's a lot of different things that you can feed them because they're omnivores.
Dude, they love the cat food.
Yeah, they do.
Love the cat food.
They love cat food, and they'll
come in the door. If they think there's cat food.
It's fun to see how they start to understand you, or at least the pair of shoes you are. So
that's the amazing thing. They come out. They're turtles. I'm not thinking the brains are huge. Yet every day they come not wandering past, but walking right up to the door, looking around, stretching that neck out, wondering where that hunk of cat food I'm about to toss out is. They're cagey veterans of this.
And and just as an aside, Bob, I'm watching you as we're doing this, and I think maybe you get someone to fabricate a nice Bob Harris size shell, and that's your Halloween get up every year.
I'd be fine with that.
Turtle Bob representing the turtles, representing. It's always great. A lot of mutual affection here between Bob and I, folks, and that's part of the reason we're going off into box turtle land, because there's a lot of great philosophical. I didn't get to give you a chance to do the plant-based, and we're doing a lot. We do farmers markets, Bob. In your honor, we think of you when we eat our salads and we have our smoothies because you're inspiration. But you've also been inspiration, as I like to say. Bob Harris' name is on the sandbox in the corner, the initials etched in. You were one of the people that built this. So I'm glad you get to enjoy it. And we get to enjoy you.
You are too kind, sir.
On the couch. You're kind. This fantasy football world, the football world we're in, is kind to let us do our thing and not get clawed at by the world the way other people out their day jobs that hopefully we can help you through this show and other things we do. So folks, thank you so much. It's exciting. You feel the juice is flowing now. The draft happened. We've turned the
green flag. The draft is the green flag.
Exactly.
Season, right? We're going.
And we're going to get little pieces of data every day and start to fill in our understanding. And the next thing we know, it'll be the season. So, folks, thank you so much for the opportunity as always. We would like to deliver you the best always because you're so very glad.